When we think of the rise of Christianity, our minds often turn to Jesus of Nazareth, the Roman Empire, or the apostles who carried the gospel across the Mediterranean. But centuries before Jesus walked the earth, another man, driven by conquest rather than compassion, unknowingly laid the geopolitical and cultural foundations that would allow Christianity to flourish. That man was Alexander the Great. Born in 356 BC in the Macedonian kingdom, Alexander was tutored by Aristotle and trained for war by his father, King Philip II. After his father's assassination, Alexander ascended to the throne at just 20 years old. What followed was a blitz of military conquests unlike anything the ancient world had ever seen. In just over a decade, Alexander defeated the mighty Persian Empire in a series of remarkable battles, most notably at Issus, 333 BC, and Gaugamela, 331 BC. At Issus, despite being outnumbered, Alexander decisively defeated King Darius III of Persia, forcing him to retreat into the heart of his empire. Gaugamela, however, would be remembered as the battle that shattered Persian dominance in the region and marked the end of their imperial power. But Alexander's conquests didn't stop at Persia. After the defeat of Darius, he marched through Egypt, where he was hailed as a liberator and crowned pharaoh. In Egypt, he famously founded the city of Alexandria, which would later become a major center of learning and culture in the ancient world, symbolizing the fusion of Greek and Egyptian cultures under his rule. Beyond Egypt, he pressed further eastward, crossing the Hindu Kush into what is now Afghanistan and Pakistan, where he defeated the fierce tribes of Central Asia. His march continued into the Indian subcontinent and marked the furthest point of Alexander's military campaign, as his troops, exhausted and longing for home, mutinied and refused to march further into India. These conquests were not just military victories. They represented a strategic reshaping of the ancient world. By crossing the Hindu Kush, Alexander broke the geographical barrier between East and West, effectively bridging the Greek and Persian worlds with those of Central Asia and the Indian subcontinent. This allowed for cultural exchange and trade routes that would later become vital for the spread of ideas, including those of Christianity. But while his military campaigns are legendary, it is the cultural and civilizational legacy of Alexander that would echo far louder in the centuries to come, especially in the rise of Christianity. Alexander wasn't merely a conqueror, he was a visionary of empire. Wherever he went, he spread the ideals of Hellenism, Greek language, art, philosophy, and governance. He founded more than 20 cities, many of which became centers of trade, learning, and administration. These cities, especially Alexandria in Egypt, would later become critical hubs for early Christian thinkers, translators, and missionaries. One of Alexander's most significant contributions to Christianity, though unintentional, was the widespread adoption of the Greek language. By the time of Jesus, Greek had become the lingua franca of much of the Mediterranean and Near East. Not just any Greek, but Koine Greek, a simplified everyday form of the classical language that was accessible to people across regions and classes. It was in Koine Greek that the New Testament was written, allowing the message of Jesus to reach merchants, soldiers, slaves, and scholars alike. This linguistic unity was indispensable to the rapid spread of the gospel. Rome brought the roads and law. Alexander had brought the language and cultural groundwork. Together, these elements created the ideal conditions for a faith like Christianity to move swiftly across borders. Moreover, Hellenistic philosophy, particularly Stoicism and Platonism, had already primed the minds of many in the ancient world to seek higher truths, moral order, and even a logos, a divine rational principle. When the Apostle John wrote, "In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God," he was speaking directly into that Hellenistic intellectual heritage. The gospel message was not foreign to that world. It was a fulfillment of its deepest philosophical longings. Even in Judea, Alexander's influence was felt. Though the Jewish people fiercely guarded their identity, Hellenistic thought still seeped into their institutions. The Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, was produced in Alexandria centuries after Alexander's conquests. It was this Greek version of the Old Testament that became the Bible for early Christians, and it made the Hebrew God accessible to the entire Greco-Roman world. Alexander's conquests also reshaped the psychological and political landscape of the ancient world. He replaced old tribal loyalties with a broader concept of cosmopolitanism, a shared identity that transcended ethnicity. This made the universal appeal of Christianity, its message of salvation for all peoples, far more resonant. The idea of one God, one truth, for all mankind, became conceivable in a world that had already been introduced to the idea of one empire under one ruler. Moreover, the trade routes and road networks established or influenced by Alexander's empire allowed for unprecedented movement of ideas, people, and goods. When the Romans later built upon this infrastructure, the apostles could travel quickly and safely to major cities across the empire. Paul's missionary journeys, for example, followed paths that Alexander had helped carve out centuries earlier. Even the philosophical groundwork mattered. Greek thinkers had long pondered questions of virtue, the soul, the divine, and the ideal life. By the time the gospel arrived, many Gentiles were already spiritually curious, disillusioned with paganism, and hungry for meaning. Christianity would offer them something radically new, but intelligible within a framework they already knew, thanks to the philosophical seeds planted by Greek culture. Alexander the Great died young, never knowing the full consequences of his ambition. He wanted to unite the world under his name. Instead, he unintentionally prepared the world for a man whose kingdom was not of this world. Jesus would arrive not with a sword, but with a message. But it was Alexander's sword that had cleared the way, linguistically, culturally, geographically, and psychologically, for that message to travel swiftly and take root deeply. So, while Alexander pursued glory through war, he inadvertently cleared a path for peace through the gospel. His ambition united a fragmented world under a shared language, culture, and curiosity, making it possible, centuries later, for a Jewish carpenter's message of love, redemption, and eternal life to reach hearts far beyond Jerusalem. In the strange irony of history, the general who sought to become a god unwittingly helped create the conditions for the world to believe in a God who became man.